Hello, everyone. My name is Cole Simcoe. I work for Making Sense, also under the USAID YP2L Lead project and YouthLead. I just wanted to say a quick welcome to everyone before we start. Finally, I wanted to direct everyone to the Reaching 16 campaign, which is also a YouthLead and a UNDP campaign focusing on peace and justice under the SDGs, the 16th SDG for Sustainable Development. That is running through the end of the month. It's a great hashtag to check out for different resources and see what youth are doing in the peace and justice space. So with that, and I'll turn it over to Ariel.
Thank you so much, Cole. Welcome, everyone. We're excited to be here today. Before we get into a formal introduction of us all, we wanted to kick it off and ask, where are you joining from? I've already seen lots of awesome different areas from all over the world, people already starting to share. But if you haven't yet had a chance, or because we've had so many folks who are still logging in, go ahead and drop in the chat, where are you joining us from today? Where in the world are you? What time of day is it? You'll see from our folks, we've got people all the way from Lee in Australia. We're in the DC area, Jen over in Copenhagen, Karina in Mexico. So even our team here with you today is spread from all over. We'd also love to know if you have thoughts and ideas about what you're hoping to get from this session. Why is it that you joined us today, and what are you hoping to learn or leave with at the end of the session? Thank you all. This is so exciting to see. Please continue to go ahead and drop this in here. I'm seeing so many different countries from around the world. This is actually one of the things I think I love most about Unleash, is that it does bring people together from every corner of the globe, if you will, bringing them together to talk about these important and awesome issues and how we can work together to actually accomplish the change that we all hope to see. So please continue to drop that in the chat. We're going to go ahead and get going so we can maximize the time that we have with you all today. And please do continue to drop in those ideas of things that you're hoping to learn. That way we can make sure we try our best to incorporate those, and we'll revisit that in just a minute. But as we're asking you all what it is that you're hoping to get out of today, and what you're maybe coming here with, and maybe you already are working on some things in your daily lives or in your free time because you're very passionate and engaged youth in your communities. And so I'd ask you to pause for a moment and think about, do you have an idea for a solution? As you were thinking about coming today, or maybe something you're working on, do you already have an idea of what it is that you want to do? I'd ask you to either physically write it down on a piece of paper if you do have some notepad with you, maybe a little Post-it, or mentally write it down in your head. I'll give everyone just a second. All right, hopefully you guys have those ideas. Then I'm going to ask you to fold that paper. If you have the physical paper, fold it up. And if you don't, in your brain, you're folding it, you're making a nice crease. And then we're going to ask everyone to drop that in the virtual bucket. Take those ideas, take that folded piece of paper, and we're going to ask you to set those aside. If I had a physical bucket, I'd come around the room and physically ask you guys to pop them in. Those ideas are important, they're valuable, and your insights that you contribute are so important, and we want you to bring those thoughts and experiences with us today. But those ideas for the solution, we're going to ask you to intentionally set those aside, and we're going to save those for later. And today we're going to walk you through a different way to start that process. With that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Jen to let her talk about the agenda and how we're going to approach the rest of the day.
Thank you, and hi everyone. It's so great to see so many people on this call and from so many places as well. I tried, based on your responses in the chat, to actually create a tally, and I gave up pretty quickly. But I hope that that will not be your approach to this webinar today. We have a lot of very exciting challenges for you. So it's a pretty packed agenda. We'll be kicking off with an introduction to Unleash for those who are unfamiliar with our program, and talk a little bit about our partnership with Chemonics. We'll then be joined by two of our Unleash talents who will talk about their experiences at Unleash and what has come of it in terms of their continued engagement in the Sustainable Development Goals. We'll go into an explanation of what the innovation process is, and including some aspects of the innovation methodology that we typically use in our programs. We'll then spend the majority of our time here today doing a deep dive into two parts of our innovation process, namely problem framing and ideation. The idea here is to dive into these activities to give you some hands-on experience. So for this part, we will be asking you to share your thoughts, to share your experiences and reflections and specific outputs in the chat. You can do that by writing directly, or if it's an exercise where we've asked you to draw something out, you can take a picture of it and then pop it into the chat. That should be possible, and we'll be monitoring your answers, and we'll do our best to answer any questions that come up as we go along in this presentation. And then finally, at the end, we'll conclude with the question and answer session, so you can let us know your thoughts about the innovation process and ask us anything else that you'd like to know about Unleash. So we have 4 speakers today. I'll just start by introducing myself, and then maybe we can just go along. But my name is Jennifer. I'm a member of the Unleash Secretariat and have been part of it for the past 3 years. I've been part of organizing our global innovation labs, which we'll hear more about in Singapore and in China, and currently lead our efforts to provide post-program support to all of our community members, which I think at this point are around 4,000 people from 167 countries. Over to you, Ariel.
Thank you. My mute button keeps getting a little finicky here, so thanks for your patience. I'm Ariel Berghammer-Ziegler. I am a Senior Innovation Specialist with Chemonics International. We are the lead scale partner for Unleash, which we'll talk about a little later. But I'm also an Unleash talent. I've been a facilitator and have also been helping with the program design and the rollout of the Unleash Plus program. Very excited to be here with you today. And we're so delighted to have 2 speakers with you that are also Unleash talents. We'll get into their backgrounds a little bit more in just a minute, but Karina, if you'd like to wave or say hello, or if you do want to pop up and say hi, you'll notice that Karina will be very active in the chat today. She recently did have jaw surgery, so we're very excited to have her with us, and she'll be actively chatting, but may not be quite as able to communicate verbally with us in here. So feel free to ask her questions or call her out directly in there. And Lee, would you like to say hi?
Yeah, hello everyone. My name's Lee, calling in from Australia. I'm an Unleashed talent from 2018, as well as a facilitator and organizer. And I also run an organization here in Australia called Spur, and we specialize in social impact strategy.
Thank you guys so much. And with that, we will we'll be your speakers today, and we're going to kick it off with an introduction, which I'm going to hand back over to Jen for now.
Thank you. So I think the best way to present Unleash and everything we do is actually in video form. So I think on the next slide, there should be a video that I hope you enjoy.
In the beginning of 2020, the Unleashed team the next location. In the beginning of 2020, the Unleashed team was working on securing the next location for Unleash Innovation Lab. But then COVID-19 started spreading, and social distancing and lockdowns occurred all over the world.
To support our community, we quickly set up the first hackathons focusing on COVID-19, which took place across 6 time zones. This success kickstarted a whole new Hacks program, beginning this fall with 16 teams all over the world and resulting in nearly 500 new Unleashed talents.
We launched the second Unleash Plus with Chemonics as the lead scale partner, and this time we've had even more teams, facilitators and experts working together online. We're also initiating our new ambassador program, which will allow for more focused engagement across all regions and SDGs. Alongside this, we've been developing an online platform for networking and resource sharing among the community.
This year, we saw all of the Unleashed talents persevere through internet troubles, work across time zones, and learn new online platforms. We have all been able to create change. This time, not only social change, but also change within ourselves and our approach to the work. Through it all, Unleashed talents continued to pursue their solutions and build their networks, and we can't wait to see what they'll accomplish next. In the beginning of
Awesome. Hope you enjoyed that. So officially, Unleash began in 2017 as an organization based in Denmark. It has since grown exponentially every single year. We like to think of Unleash not as a single organization or a single program, but rather as a global initiative that brings together young leaders and experts and entrepreneurs from all over the world to develop innovative solutions to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Our vision is to build the world's leading platform for innovation and enable the creation of scalable solutions to the Sustainable Development Goals by engaging young talents in the problem-solving process and providing the support needed to bring the best ideas to life. Important to mention is that as a pillar of all of our programs, we provide scholarships for all of our talents. We do that because we find it to be very, very important that Unleash is open to everyone everywhere, regardless of their socioeconomic background or individual circumstances. So whenever we have had physical events, for example, we have covered every single cost and expense, thereby ensuring that no one sort of has to take a personal cost in their work to address the SDGs. Finally, over the past 3 years, our work has made us the 54th most influential sustainability brand globally. And it is one of our key goals to be in the top 10 very, very, very soon. Next slide. So as a program or as a portfolio of programs, Unleash focuses on enhancing the role of young leaders and entrepreneurs from all around the world by giving them the tools and knowledge to lead sustainable change in their own communities. Through mass action, we thereby enable global impact on the SDGs. So all of our programs speak to enabling young people, basically equipping people interested in creating local change to be aware of the possibilities for sustainable change and the role that they can play as individuals in achieving it. We provide capacity building through our programs in critical skill sets and open vast networks for young leaders and entrepreneurs who are interested for them to succeed. And then finally, we support promising ideas, the best ideas to come out of our programs with pathways to finance and accelerator programs, ensuring that even after people leave an Unleash program, they can continue to grow and continue to have impact afterwards as well. Next slide. Our typical Unleashed talents, as I mentioned before, come from all over the world. I think in 2019, for our Global Innovation Lab, we had talents from a total of 167 countries. We spent a great deal of time ensuring that we select people who not only have an interest or an academic background in sustainability, but also people who have lived experiences that they are interested and invested in addressing. What that means in terms of our participants is that 3% of our talent pool come from marginalized groups who have held refugee status, for example. We also care a great deal about equal access in terms of gender. So 52% of our talents have self-identified as female, 47% as male, and 1% as non-binary. All of our talents, since as an organization, we work specifically with youth, all of our talents are between ages 18 and 35, with an average age of 27, sorry. However, that's not to say that we don't work with people who are more senior and who have, through a long career in sustainability or a related field, achieved a kind of experience that is helpful in sustainability work. The way that we include those people is through the role of facilitators and experts and specialists who join Unleash in a capacity where they can contribute their specific insights, their specific knowledge to help along any new ideas and solutions during Unleash. They play a really, really critical role. And in that way, we also ensure that, while we equip youth, that we don't sort of ignore the knowledge and the wisdom of other people who may not participate in Unleash as talents. Finally, we believe that changemakers and entrepreneurs can come from everywhere. So we make sure to include a sort of diverse set of participants from academia and from the private sector and from NGOs and social enterprises, as well as the public sector. Of course, we recognize that entrepreneurship looks very, very different in different sectors. In some sectors, a solution is a startup. That's the shape it takes on. It's a new product maybe. And somewhere else, it is a process for diversification, or it's a process for more inclusive legislation, depending on where someone works and where their area of expertise is. Next slide. So this is actually a picture from the inaugural Unleash Innovation Lab that was held in Denmark in 2017. We gathered 1,000 people in one place, and this is at the opening ceremony. Looking at this picture now, I really miss the ability to do this. I'm also a little bit worried because if this had been today, it would not seem a wise choice to have 1,000 people hold hands. But at the time, it was a very, very, very moving moment, all kind of standing up together and making a commitment that over the next 10 days, we would do what we could to contribute our energy and ideas to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. The way that Unleash Innovation Lab happens, it also goes by the name Unleash Engage, is that we take people who have demonstrated active engagement in their communities. They're not necessarily already entrepreneurs. And we bring them together for a 6-day innovation process. During this time, They learn from each other, they learn from their surroundings, they learn from the country that they're in, different approaches to sustainability. And then they work in groups to identify specific challenges that they're interested in working in. And then they work on that solution until at the end they pitch it at a Dragon's Den, where the top solutions are picked. In that way, we do incorporate a competitive element, but the big focus of Unleash is really on co-creation. Since 2017, we have held innovation labs in Singapore and Shenzhen as well, so 3 in total. Each time, I believe we've worked with approximately 300 partners to help us reach as many different kinds of talents as possible. And as a result, we've had over 600 solutions coming out of the Innovation Lab alone. Yeah, next slide. Another program that we run is Unleash Hacks, which takes the same approach of the Innovation Lab, and the same tools and the same sort of DNA and mission, but apply it to very localized and scalable innovation processes. The idea here is that Unleash should not be something that is very centralized, or something that only takes place once a year, but is actually a set of ongoing activities that can be owned by anyone who has ever been part of our program. So Unleash Hacks, of which there were 16 this year, in addition to 6 specific COVID-19 hacks, are run by Unleashed talents, who then receive support from us in the Secretariat. We find that each organizing team really makes each hack their own. They do so by defining a specific theme that they are interested in working with, sometimes also specific sub-themes. So not just, say, water, but specifically water treatment, specifically access to water in rural areas. And then they plan a full program over 2 days, and they execute the whole thing with help from facilitators and experts from the Unleash network. What you see here on the slide, I think, is a meetup with all of the talents who took part in our Unleash hacks in Bangladesh and Italy and Singapore. So these 3 hacks took place all in the same weekend, and then the organizing teams made it so that all of the participants from all of the different hacks would meet in a social activity, and in that way Unleash also becomes a very social phenomenon, a very bonding sort of experience. Because of COVID, so Unleash hacks can happen physically and virtually because of the situation this year with COVID-19. All of our hacks have been virtual, and we've had to make use of a lot of virtual tools. So on the right, what you see is a Miro board, which all of the participants used as a sort of guided process from problem framing to idea creation and prototyping and so on. We'll talk about the innovation process later. Yeah, next slide. I believe this is you, Ariel.
Thank you so much, Jen, and thank you everyone for your engagement in the chat. We hope to get to those questions and continue answering things as we go. And so building on the programs that Jen has discussed, we also have rolled out last year and then this year for the second time the Unleash Plus program, which Chemonics helped to come in and work with Unleash to create Unleash Plus and launch it to really help individuals and teams that are scaling solutions to have impact on the Sustainable Development Goals. And so you'll get to hear a little bit more about that when we discuss with Lee shortly. But the idea behind this is to really take those teams and the individuals that were passionate about an idea or a solution to solve a local challenge and help them to actually drive that forward, to launch a social impact venture, a business, or even entrepreneurship within an organization to try to influence more change for a sustainable goal. And so in this picture, you can actually see two examples of two of our teams that were awarded last year. YouthLead from Tanzania, which is working on sustainable fish feed, and then also Permalution from Mexico, which is looking at fog harvesting as an alternative water source. And then by going through this program, which we'll discuss a little bit more in the methodology, we're really looking at what are the components of a business plan that these individuals need to focus on to be able to actually launch a business, and looking at those key areas and providing access to dedicated facilitator support and expertise in all of these critical areas through a 6-month pre-accelerator program in order to support these teams on this journey to launch. And then they have the opportunity to compete at the end of the program, which Lee and his team 123 plus also won this year, to be able to actually receive funding and some in-kind contributions from a number of different donors. And so this is one area in particular that really is why Chemonics is involved. And it's because for those of you who don't know us, Chemonics is not only the lead scale partner for Unleash, but we are one of USAID's implementing partners. So some of you might see projects that we've been implementing around the world. We operate in over 150 countries and have been in business for about 45 years, actively looking to drive sustainable solutions impacting the Sustainable Development Goals around the globe. We operate in all areas, really looking to innovate, to support local leaders, and to drive change in the communities in which we work. And so for us, coming together with Unleash that also has this global mission to support youth and to empower change. We saw this as a no-brainer to partner together and try to join our forces and that global workforce that we have in over 5,000 staff around the world to really help take that change to the next level and to really scale the impact that we all seek to have. And we discussed briefly in the chat just a little bit ago, but one of the big areas that we really hope to continue supporting is to continue to find those synergies with projects happening around the world with lots of different donors, different youth and engagement, and these Unleash programs and ideas that are happening so that we can really try to take all of those collective efforts and by working together, sustain more change and have more impact. And so with this, we're very excited to actually move into the next part of our panel and really give our folks, Lee and Karina, a bit more of an opportunity to talk about their experiences. So as I was just mentioning, in the Unleash journey, there are lots of different ways to engage. And you will see that both Karina and Lee are absolute superstars and have both been engaged in all of the programs that Jen and I were just talking about. So we're going to get a chance to speak with both of them. And quickly, I'm going to help Karina introduce herself, but she will be communicating in the chat as well. So please don't hesitate to ask her questions. But we're very excited to have Karina Perez with us. In addition to being an Unleashed talent from 2019 in Singapore, or excuse me, in Shenzhen, China, she also participated as one of the very first organizing teams for the Dominican Republic for Unleash Hacks this year. And she has recently been selected as part of the brand new Unleash Ambassador program. Karina, in her day job, is a MEL specialist for Chemonics, working on USAID-funded programs that are focused on violence and crime prevention and reduction. Part of the reason we were very excited to have Karina speak with us today is because we are really trying to demonstrate how, as part of this Reaching 16 campaign, and with the goal of youth participating to foster justice and inclusion and security around the world, Karina is working on these areas every day in her normal work and has a lot of experience focusing on how we drive inclusion through our projects. I'm going to read a quote. I will do my best to do Karina justice, but something she shared is that through my experience with Unleash, my project was able to justify to our client an innovation focal point, which is now part of my scope of work. We plan to integrate human-centered design and our technical assistance to local civil service organizations and to organize an innovation hack further in the life of the project. Taking part in Unleash is invigorating. The program itself is about intense work under time pressure, but its effectiveness is outstanding. Looking at the solutions developed during the innovation process reminds us that positive change is possible if we work together. Thank you so much, Karina, for sharing that. And I know that Karina has prepared some other thoughts and reflections as well that she'll be sharing in the chat as we go. We're so glad that you're here with us today. Thank you so much. And then we're also incredibly happy to have Lee with us, who also is an Unleash champion through and through. Lee Crockford is the co-founder and director of Spur and Spur.org. He is joining us all the way from Australia, where it is very late. So extra excited to have you. He is also an Unleash talent from 2018. He returned to support as a facilitator in 2019, and then also helped to organize one of the very first hacks in Australia. And then, as I just mentioned, we have the amazing pleasure of having him in the Unleash Plus 2020 program, where his team just won. And with that, Lee, I'll let you introduce yourself and talk about your experience.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much indeed, Ariel. So I might start by just telling you a little bit about the project that we're now working on, which was ideated at Unleash using design thinking as the principles to get it started. Our project called 123 Plus. It's changed quite a lot since we first ideated it in 2018, but really where it started was this understanding of how, and an appreciation really of how lucky I am to have been born in the country that I was, simply for the fact that right now I could actually be in jail, or I could be dead right now, having been killed by my state or my country, all simply for the fact that I'm gay. And this is a reality for millions of LGBT people around the world. And so the team that I was working with in Singapore in 2018 was really looking at how might we improve health equity outcomes for LGBT people around the world. And sorry, just to clarify, that term LGBT, for those who might not be familiar with it, stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender. Sometimes it has an I for intersex and Q for queer, and sometimes a plus at the end for all other variations that kind of follow from there. And so really where we've ended up with 123 Plus is that we are now effectively a capacity builder. We know that less than 0.026% of global philanthropy goes towards LGBT causes around the world. It's a massively underfunded space, and we've got organizations and initiatives and governments and businesses who are fighting for rights, who are fighting for safety, not just in terms of decriminalization, but also same-sex marriage, equal protections at work, a whole raft of issues. And so what our focus is we're building a global network of partners to help provide that capacity building, so that any initiative or organization around the world who is looking to improve outcomes for LGBT people can get in touch with 123 Plus. And there's really two key things that we do. One, we can connect people to organizations that will help them develop strategy. So in South Africa, we've got a new partner coming on board with Dalberg. And so organizations in Southern Africa, if they need support, can go to Dalberg. But we also appreciate too that as an organization, and even as a network of partners around the world, we're probably not ever going to be able to work with every single organization one-on-one. And so we also curate a range of tools and knowledge and resources. So we have experts in their field around the world helping us to develop canvases and information resources. So if you are on this call and you're working on LGBTIQ plus issues and do want to tap into those resources, they're free on the 123 Plus website. So that's just a little bit of an overview of the work that we do. And so, yeah, we started in 2018 through Engage, and then we returned this year to take part in the Unleash Plus program, where we were lucky enough to walk away with some of that prize money. Ariel, obviously I could talk about this for days, but I might stop there because I know that you had some specific questions in mind.
Thank you so much, Lee, and thank you for sharing that. And just for everyone here as well, please feel free, if you already have some questions that you'd like to make sure we have Lee or Karina answer, drop them into the chat. And in the meantime, Lee, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about your experience with Unleash. Obviously, we can see you've come back to these programs. You've just mentioned 123 plus originated that idea together in your experience. But how has this impacted you, perhaps personally? And then how did you translate that back into your role with Spur and decide to bring that back to actually scale that idea within your own organization?
Many years ago, I remember a mentor of mine said a phrase to me, which has always really stuck in my head, which is, if you want to change the conversation, you need to change the people in the conversation. And I think Unleash, regardless of which program that is, whether that's Engage or Hacks or Plus, is just such an excellent example of that. You know, it's, I think in the year that it was in Singapore, I think it might have been 110 countries represented by participants. And this idea, you know, Australia, it is a big country, but it's also a very isolated country. We're right down at the bottom of the world. We're an island. And so that sort of global connectivity, I think sometimes we miss out on a lot down here. And so to be in a room, not only in a team where we had people from 5 different countries, but to spend 10 days with 1,000 people from around the world bouncing ideas off each other and really kind of critiquing, well, why are you doing that? Well, have you considered this? Well, in this country, we're doing this. Why not look at that? To have that sort of input for 10 days straight is just such an incredible opportunity. And I think because of that global connectivity in the room, it instantly just kind of shifts you into this mindset of just thinking naturally globally. I think, you know, if you were to take part in a domestic program or a program in your country, it's really easy to think about, well, how might we solve a problem for the country that I'm in? Whereas when you're talking with people around the world, instantly your language and your conversation just goes to, well, how do we scale this internationally? This is a global issue. How might the thing that we do be able to help people regardless of where they are in the world? And so I think, you know, as Ariel mentioned, I also run an organization called Spur, and we do specialize in social impact strategy. So a lot of the approaches of Unleash aren't necessarily that different to the sorts of approaches that we've been doing for the last, 8-10 years at Spur. But I think also too, there's an element of, it's always hardest to critique yourself. And we might be able to sit down with the clients that we work with and go through design thinking processes, etc. But when you're doing it yourself, there's no substitute to having someone else lead you through that process and having other people in that conversation. Because all of a sudden you have people saying things to you that you're like, oh yeah, if roles were reversed, these are absolutely the things that we would be saying to other people. But when it's yourself, it's really hard to be subjective and look at the thing that you're passionate about and the things that you want to change. When you're inside it, it's really hard to be able to look at that objectively. And so design thinking and Unleash and the approach that Unleash takes is just such an incredible experience, regardless of where you are in terms of your understanding of design thinking. If you're just starting out, amazing, you're going to learn so much. Even if you've been doing this sort of work for years, there's still so much you will take away from it as well.
Thank you so much, Lee. That's incredibly inspirational and just so exciting to see as you guys have evolved. I've only gotten to watch for a couple of years, but I've been very excited to see that progress. And obviously you guys have been successful. You've continued to move your organization forward. And I'm wondering if in your experiences as a youth leader and someone who is really an intrapreneur as well as an entrepreneur, can you talk at all about how you have overcome certain challenges or obstacles that you've faced in this journey? And if there are particular pieces of advice or wisdom that you might share with this group of individuals that might also be motivated to be leading change wherever they are?
I think that, at least personally, one of the biggest challenges in this space, and I know I'm talking for myself as well as a lot of people in the social impact space, is there is such a huge difference between outputs and outcomes. It's really exciting. It's really easy to get excited about a project or, hey, let's do this really cool thing, or let's do that, or let's do this program or this campaign. But is that thing that you're doing ultimately going to change people's lives in the way that you want it to? And how will you know that? How do you measure that? How do you, if you go out there into the big wide world with a campaign or with a company or with an initiative, how do you know that people's lives are actually being changed by that? And I think with 123 plus, we've gone through a huge journey over the last 3 years we've effectively gone through 3 different business models in 3 years, where the outcome is still the same of how do we improve the lives of LGBT plus people, but the outputs and the inputs in terms of how we go about that, how might we affect that change, has changed completely for a whole range of reasons. When we first started out, we were looking at how might we basically put the spotlight on different countries each year. So we might pick a country and say, Sri Lanka this year, how might we really improve LGBTIQ plus rights in Sri Lanka, get kind of global attention on that country, get in funding. We like that model, whole lot of challenges in terms of logistics, in terms of a whole range of other things. We then shifted the model to look at, well, can we predict through research how likely a country is to achieve decriminalization when you examine it through a whole range of domains of political, social, visibility, those sorts of things. We loved that idea, and I still love that idea. The logistics involved in doing that was a massive international research project that would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions. As a small organization, we just don't have the resources to do that, even if we do get some funding. And so this model that we've ended up with this partnership network, we've still got outcomes in mind. The outputs have completely changed, and we've had to tweak the model to be able to work for us as a small organization. You know, if we were, let's say someone like Chemonics who went, hey, let's do this sort of project, the sort of resources, the number of people working for them is such a different kettle of fish, and maybe that second research approach might have worked. But for us at Spur, we're a much smaller kettle of fish, and so you kind of constantly have to be tweaking and iterating those projects that you're working on.
Thank you so much. That's excellent advice. And thank you for bringing up the point about partners. Lots of individuals have been talking about projects on the ground, partnerships, working together. Do you have any words of wisdom or anything in particular that you think has worked very well in achieving partnerships, or perhaps anything about how you choose which partners to approach when you guys do that as part of your organization?
Yeah, well, this is actually something we're working with Chemonics with at the moment. And so when we won some of the prize money with Unleash Plus, part of that was cash money, but some of that was also in-kind support. So we have the pleasure of, in 2021, being able to work with Chemonics. I think our first workshop is tomorrow or Thursday. I'll check my calendar, with Chemonics to have this very conversation around what do partnerships look like? What does that life cycle of finding a partner, working with them, aligning not just what you're doing, but also values, also, you know, all those sorts of things as well. So far, we've learned some things, but maybe check in this time next year and we'll have a lot more to share around how is it that you manage partnerships, because that's a journey that really we're just beginning and there's a lot we need to learn ourselves.
Thank you. And I did see one other quick question in the chat before we will transition. But Lee, I think you're getting some wonderful compliments about your ability to speak. And I know that earlier people were actually asking about applications. I know in the process of going through Unleash, there is a lot of pitching and actual verbal communication and presenting your ideas. Are there ideas that you have for individuals about how you've developed those skills, things that you suggest to them to be working on, or the importance of being able to speak publicly?
Yeah, well, first of all, it is 2 a.m. here in Australia. So I think being rather tired probably makes it a lot easier to speak calmly and slowly. But I guess more realistically, I have a background in the arts and performing arts. And I think one of the things that's helped me the most over the years is try and find situations that make you uncomfortable, I guess, when it comes to performing. I did a stand-up comedy course about a decade ago now, and it was one of the most horrific, horrible things I've ever done in terms of, you know, it was terrifying because not only are you speaking to people publicly, but you're also trying to be funny, and people don't like to laugh necessarily if you're not being that funny. And so I think, you know, when you kind of set that bar of having to stand in a room full of strangers and give a 10-minute stand-up comedy routine, something like this where it's on a Zoom, chatting to people who are passionate about things that you're passionate about, this is really easy. This is just like having a coffee and a catch up. So I think if you are looking at improving presentation skills, find those opportunities that make you uncomfortable, because it's a fantastic learning journey just for that. But it also means when you go into more comfortable situations, they seem way less terrifying than what they might have beforehand.
Thank you so much, Lee. Really appreciate it. And if you all have more questions, please feel free to write in the chat to both Karina and Lee. Here is the awesome link to, well, I think it's already been shared in the chat, but also feel free if you have a phone and you're using a computer to scan the QR code, check out the amazing work that 123 Plus is doing and Lee's organization. Please feel free to get in touch with them. We are going to let Lee leave us as he's ready. As he mentioned, it is 2 a.m. in Australia, but we thank you so much for making the space to join us today and for all of the work that you're doing around the world. And we're really hopeful to engage you again in future conversations. And then Karina, thank you so much for being here. I believe you'll be joining us for a little while, so please feel free to jump in and share your perspective as we dig into more of the design thinking approach. But if you all do have questions, if there's any last minute things that perhaps you didn't feel comfortable asking to the group, but you'd like to know, maybe just chat Lee privately before he logs off, or go ahead and ask right in the chat. Thank you everyone so much. Thank you, Lee. And then we're going to go ahead and transition now into the next phase. And for that, I'm going to hand it back over to Jen. Thanks again.
Thanks. So I just want to take the time to answer quickly a few questions that we've received in the chat and also on Facebook. There's a question around what programs Unleash will be doing in 2021. So we will soon. So if you go on and you follow us on our Facebook page or Instagram or LinkedIn, you will be able to see any updates about our programs. I know that we have applications for organizers for Unleash Hacks coming up over the next, I think, 2 or 3 weeks, very, very soon. Organizing teams need to have, as far as I remember, at least one person who has been part of Unleash before, but there's still a great way to organize locally. For those who are not as interested in organizing, but more interested in actually taking part in the innovation process, over the next couple of months, each organizing team will be opening up for applications for their individual hack. We do not yet know what countries these will be taking place in, but you can find a lot of information about which countries they have previously taken place in on our website on www.unleash.org. And the fact that that a hack is taking place in a country does not, in 2020, doesn't mean that a hack cannot also take place in that country in 2021. There is also a question. Oh, and then aside from hacks, we will also be doing Unleash Plus again this year. I am uncertain about the time, but maybe Ariel can speak to that later, and otherwise you can also find information on that on our Facebook page. And as for Unleash Innovation Lab or Unleash Engage, I'm sure you can all understand that while we're very, very excited about gathering 1,000 people in one place sometime in the future, it seems a really, really bad idea to do it right now. So we're holding our breath, just waiting for the day that everyone can safely do so, and then we'll let as many people know as we possibly can. A final question I just want to address quickly is from Facebook around a lot of applicants. So I'm actually just going to read the question. I live in a society where most young people are not educated, but these are people who are doing great jobs in their various communities. Most applications for this type of event have essays, and these people feel that they cannot be part of it. So how are you trying to identify and access these people? So our approach is, well, first of all, I want to say that it's far from all of our participants who necessarily have an advanced academic degree. We actually spend a lot of time making sure that as many participants as possible come from circumstances where they wouldn't necessarily normally be able to access opportunities for creating a global network. So the way that we do that is by, so we do need everyone to apply, but then once they're in the evaluation process, we work with over, I believe, 200 or 300 evaluators from many different countries and provide them with onboarding and training to make sure that when applicants are being scored, that they're not being scored on their fluency, that they're not being scored on their ability to use long words or present very, very complex or academic ideas, but they are actually just being scored on their motivation, on their passion, and on their past demonstration of engagement in their own communities. Great. I will then, I'll now move on to the next part of our presentation. I'll just give you a quick overview of the innovation process that we use across our programs. So on the next slide, you see an innovation process that's made up of these 5 colored blocks. These are the 5 phases that are part of our methodology. All of our talents begin the process from left to right. So everyone starts with problem framing, which is where they work in groups to define or to develop a well-defined problem statement based on an actionable insight and a need from a user or a customer. The next phase of the innovation process is ideation and idea selection. This is where our participants come up with as many ideas as they possibly can to address the problem framing that they have come up with. And then they go through exercises that we have prepared to down select ideas and choose a single one to focus on. These 2 phases are the ones that we will focus on more in our deep dive later. The third phase of our innovation process is prototyping and sketching. And this is where participants create a tangible prototype of their idea so that potential users can experience the proposed solution. Once a prototype has been created, it is then tested and refined based on user feedback on the prototype. This is where participants make changes to their solution and they evaluate if they need to potentially go back to an earlier phase. Here it's important to mention that innovation is not a linear process. You do not, simply go through problem framing, then ideation, then prototyping, and then go through, then you have a startup. But you actually go back and you refine many, many, many times over, and very, very often have to give up on ideas that simply don't match a problem framing. Lastly, there is an implementation phase where participants produce, disseminate, distribute, sell, or market their solution to actual users and customers. We wanted to include that in this innovation process. However, as you can see, it kind of goes a little bit outside of the box. And to make sure that we addressed the many different and the complex processes of implementation, we developed an additional extended innovation process, which you can see on the next slide. And that is the process that we use for our Unleash Plus program. Here you can see the different things that our webinars, that our program, that our Unleash Plus program focus on. There's a number of workshops and exercises that are focused on defining more clearly a user and ecosystem, develop technical aspects of a solution, develop a go-to-market strategy, measure potential impact, develop people who are within the team as leaders, give them the tools that they need to develop the solutions further, develop sort of the financial materials that will allow them to attract financing and actually execute fundraising. Cool. I think in the interest of time, because I want to make sure that everyone has time to actually go through the problem framing and ideation process today, I think we will jump straight to that. So Ariel, if you will change the slide. Great. Yeah. So one of the most difficult parts of problem framing is dealing with our tendency, and I admit I have this tendency too, of coming into a process with a pre-made assumption or a solution. We strongly emphasize that this is not the best way to problem solve, and that's also why at the top of this presentation, Ariel asked all of you to write down your ideas and then put them away in a parked space where you can come back to them if relevant, but not have it be at the forefront of your mind. An example I often use to illustrate that it's a bad idea to go solution first, problem later, is with a nail and a hammer. Now, if your problem is to get a nail further into a piece of wood, then obviously a hammer is an excellent solution. But if your problem is to get the nail out of the piece of wood, then a hammer is not necessarily your best solution. It can work. You can use the back of the hammer, maybe, but there are definitely other tools that would be better in this situation. It's the same with most of the other problems we face, where a better understanding of the problem we're trying to solve helps us develop a more appropriate solution. In addition to understanding what a problem is, we also encourage you to think about the context in which a problem exists. So many of the problems that we're trying to solve as changemakers have existed for a long time. And I think it's important to ask ourselves why that is. We want you to consider whether a problem might have shifted over time, whether it has affected different kinds of people over time, if people have been affected differently, and what efforts there have been in the past to solve a problem and why these have failed. The more specific your understanding you have of your problem, and this includes understanding of who is affected right now and how, the better you can address that with a solution that, that doesn't replicate mistakes of the past. Yeah. So this is actually, I believe that this is a meme from a site that sort of illustrates the point about problems and solutions in a funny way. But it kind of lays out, you know, I think really well that sometimes interpretation of a problem is very, very different. And depending on the pace with which a problem is interpreted and how quickly a solution takes center stage in the process, it can sometimes lead to a very bad outcome. Sometimes it can lead to a solution that in this case is neither fun nor safe. And in some cases, it's actually really, really harmful to the ecosystem or the environment in which it exists. Yeah, I think we have a real life example after this slide of the roundabout play pump, which was a technology that was introduced in South Africa in 1994. The manufacturer who developed it did so on the basis of an assumption that the reason that there was a scarcity of water in this particular community was because it was too difficult and too time-consuming to pump water using traditional means. The play pump water system was designed as a playground merry-go-round attached to the water pump, and it was meant to be an appealing sort of pastime for local children who could play on the pump and thereby create a spinning motion that would pump underground water into a tank that was raised above the ground. This solution received a lot of widespread attention from local media outlets and from politicians from all over the world. I believe it was featured in a documentary on PBS, and it also received the World Bank Development Marketplace Award. Within 15 years, they created and installed 1,000 play pumps across Africa. However, looking back at it now, the play pump was a very flawed solution. Experts actually calculated in 2009 that children would have to play on this pump for 27 hours every day to meet the need or the stated targets of providing a full community with their daily water needs. Communities also found in general that children weren't actually interested in playing on the play pump because it wasn't particularly fun after the first couple of days. So as a result, local women would have to go and manually turn the wheels of the merry-go-round in order to pump water. The play pump was not designed at all to be used by women. It was designed for children. And so as a result, the adult women actually developed a lot of back pain and ended up spending considerably more time pumping water using this solution than they had using traditional means, and that they would have otherwise. So this is, I think, a really, really good example of why sometimes a really exciting, playful, innovative solution, if it doesn't match the problem, if it doesn't match the local circumstances, is actually designed to fail. Okay, I think it is time now that we go and we actually start our exercises for problem framing and ideation. So I'll throw it back to you, Ariel.
Thanks so much. And I do want to be cognizant of time. I do know that we ran a bit over with everyone, but I'm hoping that it's been helpful to have some of the interaction and learn more about Unleash. So we will move a little bit quickly, but next part is to really think about, so what does that mean to focus on starting with framing the problem? So you want to think about what is the end goal that you have in mind? What is it that you're trying to address overall? But then how do we actually focus on having a well-defined problem so that we can then actually work through that to better understand, even to Lee's earlier point about why would you even need to nail that piece of wood in the first place? Really taking that step back and forcing ourselves to think about what is it that we're trying to accomplish, and is that the right purpose? Are we approaching it in a way that makes sense? And are we actually going to address that need? And to do that, there are some different tools and approaches that you can use to help. When we think about problem framing within the Unleash methodology, we really believe that there are three main things to focus on. One of those is the insight, which we'll talk about a little bit more. We're also going to focus on who is the user. And sometimes you might have different users, beneficiaries, but really who are we trying to focus on, and what is that user's need? And to really try to break those down so that you can understand those components before you move into thinking about the solutions and the ideas to meet that. First, we need to understand what is the problem and where are these individuals coming from. And I would invite you in the chat to really help think about what are some of the barriers that you've seen youth facing, or to continue expanding upon the conversations that are already happening within the conversation, because I think a lot of you have probably a lot of concrete examples of places where you've seen this either go really well or perhaps poorly. So sometimes the term insight can be a little bit confusing for folks, or doesn't necessarily translate across English as well. But the point of an insight is really the reason why a challenge still exists. So this is basically why there may be a primary barrier to adoption of a solution that is addressing or mitigating that challenge. It could be why something is still in tension, or why something is still occurring. If it is a problem and it's something that needs a solution, why is that happening? What is going on in between that's preventing that other solutions or other ideas from moving forward to address it? And it is important here to really think about facts versus friction. There can be facts associated with some of these issues, like the fact that 33 million people worldwide do lack access to safe drinking water. That is a fact. That is a piece of information and a statistic, but it doesn't necessarily give us any insight into why that still happens. So then you can also describe what that means. So aside from access, another 1.8 billion drink unsafe water due to poor water supply systems. So again, still explaining the situation, but it's not really getting to that why. low-cost water treatment systems can maintain the safety of water. So that could also be something that is true, but then you're starting to already jump to a solution and how to solve the problem. It's still not really addressing what is the friction or the reason that these are still happening. So we really want to push you to focus in the problem framing phase to be thinking about that and to push harder to get to that. And so just an example of this could be water treatment systems that can ensure the water supply to households is clean is in tension with the organizations responsible for delivering clean water solutions that must also address community behaviors related to safe water access. So this is not enough time to get into all of the nuance of this. You can spend sometimes weeks working on problem framing, but the idea is to really push beyond to try to understand what is happening on the ground and the nuance or the complexity of these situations to understand why that still exists. So this is one of the first places that we start when we're doing problem framing. And we really want to dig into that. And then you want to ensure that your insight is going to be specific enough so that you can use that to start breaking down into a problem tree and an activity that will help you better understand the problem that you're facing. And so if you want to just take a moment to reflect on either anything that's been shared or problems that you have addressed and really think about what is an insight that you might share of why these problems still exist? And then feel free to continue sharing in the chat where you can write that down on that piece of paper that you have. And if you didn't come with an idea, feel free to address something related to youth's role in building peaceful, secure, and inclusive communities, really in line with our efforts for that Reaching 16 campaign. We're gonna unfortunately keep moving forward in the interest of time so that we can get through a few more slides for you all in person. And then we will share some other links for you all to be able to go through this more in depth. But Jen, I'm gonna hand it back to you quick to talk about a problem tree.
Yeah, so thank you. So problem tree is a very specific tool that we use in our programs, and it's designed to help participants get to the root causes of the problem that they're working on. Participants usually have to create 3 different problem trees. So one for their insight, one for their user, and one for their user need. What you do is you start at the top with your broad insight, which can be something along the lines of, this community lacks water. And then you ask why, you ask who, you ask how, to keep getting more specific in your definition of your insight, user, and user need. You keep asking until you cannot go any further, and at each step you become more clear about the tangible problem that you're working with. It is called a tree for a reason. It's meant to grow. And also, like a tree, sometimes the branches can overlap. A problem can have several different causes. Sometimes different aspects are related to the same sort of root causes. And so the intent for this tree, when you're creating it, is not to make it as neat as possible. It's not designed to be an overview. It's designed to be a process to make sure that you have thought through all of the different aspects of a problem before you start actually designing a solution. Once you've gotten very, very, very specific and your tree has grown, you pick one branch to focus on. So you pick one very specific insight. You pick one very, very specific user. So in using this tree, using this exercise to define users, you might start with saying, you know, this community, which is based, let's say it's in Denmark where I'm based. I might start out by saying everyone in Denmark, but then as I make it more specific, I might get down to a level of detail where I've actually been able to define the users of my problem or solution as children aged 2 to 4 based in this specific rural community. And then finally, you can do the same with your user need. I believe after this, we have another exercise. Ariel, what do you think? Can we give people a minute, or should we move along?
I think we'll keep moving, but we encourage you to actively think through this insight and what Jen is sharing. Hopefully you're actually got your piece of paper out in front of you and are digging into that problem tree. And just to emphasize, if you ever think you're done, ask yourself why or how or who a little bit further and push yourself to deeper roots.
Should you be interested in watching this this webinar as a recording, or if you are currently watching this as a recording, feel free to pause it here and then actually spend the next minute, the next 10 minutes or 30 minutes actually drawing out this problem tree. Usually at Unleash, participants spend, I want to say, at least a day. Lee and Karina, let me know if you were significantly faster, but I think it's at least a day, and for some people 2 days, and for some people more than that, coming up with the right problem framing. So this is not a task that's done quickly. Yeah, and as I mentioned before, our problem framing has 3 different components: the insight, the user, and the user need. And you can use the problem tree model to define very clearly what each of these 3 components are. So for user, you start out by writing down your user, and then you follow the process to make sure it's specific. Yeah. And this is the same problem framing tree again. Once you have a good feeling about who your user is, it can be helpful to use this user profile template to actually, you know, put a name, put a face to your user. It helps you see them, visualize them more clearly. They stop being sort of an abstract end user. During our lab, what we find is people actually often base it on people that they know, and they like to draw those people out. They give them quotes, so something that this person might say that says a lot about them. Of course, none of us are interested in creating a solution that can only be applied to one person. But a group, I think, can be represented by one person and one person's need. And so this is a tool that's really, really helpful to keep in mind, to have on your desk in front of you. Even as you move along this process and as you design a solution, you can keep going back and compare it to this user profile and ask yourself, is this solution something that this person would use? Yep, I think we can move on. Yeah, likewise, we had an example here, and we likely will not have time for you to do that, but please stop the recording here if you are able to do so, to actually do this, this exercise. Yeah, we can move on from here as well.
And we've got user need. So once you've mapped out your user, Jen, do you want to talk just a little bit quickly before we transition about how to then identify that user need?
Yeah, sure. So basically, you use the same approach as we went through before. Once you've identified who your user is, you kind of find the link between your user and your insight. So if your insight is about, you know, scarcity of water in a specific community that's impacting a very specific user, then try to use the approach that's been shown to find, you know, what is it tangibly that your user needs? Is it more information? Is it a specific tool? If so, what kind of tool is it they need? Do they need any training in order to use that tool? Is the tool readily accessible? I think these are all the different aspects that need to be considered in defining the user's need in order to make a coherent problem framing.
Again, with more time, and if you are following along, please do feel free to take the time to then dig into that user need and really think about what those look like.
So once you've defined your insight and your user need, that is when you combine it in the problem framing template. I believe we have the template on the next slide. So as you see here, our template is very simple. It starts with user needs to user's need because of insert insight at the end. The user should be a noun. So it's usually a person or a very specific group of people, or maybe it's an organization. The user's need should be a verb. So it's an action or a requirement. And the insight should be, as Ariel described earlier, it should be a friction, not a fact. And the more actionable that your insight is, the easier it'll be to start coming up with exciting, unique solutions. What we have found from practical experience is that participants or individuals who spend the most time on problem framing often have the easiest time in the ideation process, which comes after this one. And that is because they understand their problem so clearly that as they develop their solutions, they don't have to keep going back and see, you know, does this fall outside of the user need? Does this fall outside of a user group? Here we have an example of a filled out problem framing template. So here the user is local organizations working on clean water and sanitation issues. As you can see, that's very, very detailed. Don't be afraid to have your user be a very long, detailed sentence. Local organizations working on clean water and sanitation issues need a way to educate communities on water treatment practices along with relevant behaviors about hygiene that ensures community members learn about both. Because, insight, water treatment alone does not address community behaviors needed to promote safe water consumption. Here you see that the user is very, very specific. The user's need is not, you know, that they need clean water or that they need sanitation. It is a specific process or a specific way of making sure that that what is available is actually used, is actually accessible to the people who need it. Because there is an existing friction or tension that does not currently allow them to do so efficiently. This is quite complex, and this is actually something that usually takes a great deal of time to explain. So if you have more questions about this, feel free to ask them in the chat and we'll do our best to answer them there.
Thank you so much, Jen. And we do just want to remind you all, as we have been saying, that this is just the beginning. This is meant to give you a preview and an understanding of why it's so important to be starting with the problem framing and to really invest that time up front to really dissect what is the problem that's being faced. But when you spend that time really trying to figure out the problem is, who are the people that are affected, and then what those needs are, you then need to also invest the time to actually go do research on the ground, talking to people, getting out there and having interviews, talking to users, to people in the communities in which you're either serving or where you would want to implement. You need to do some desk research, see why other things might have failed that have tried to address this, or how people are approaching these. You also want to really use those tools and the activities that we went through very quickly today to invest that time to actually break out some user profiles or the problem framing trees. Only by taking the time to do that and by bringing other people into that conversation, not just doing it alone, will you be able to get to the place where you can hopefully figure out what solution is actually going to meet that need. And then to Lee and Karina's earlier points, to really also have that long-term impact that you're seeking. Because again, we're not just looking to put out some really neat ideas and neat solutions. Our hope is really that the things that we're driving and supporting through the Unleash Plus program, or even that all of you are doing in your role as youth leaders around the world, are actually going to have sustainable impact in these areas, and the challenges that you seek to overcome, that you're actually going to be able to help those, or to solve a problem, or to support others in these critical areas. So make sure that we're doing that research, run the interviews and talk to the users, develop those profiles, and then also validate the problem. Come back as well, and also talk to the experts, talk to people that are working in these spaces, reach out through every means that you have available, and leverage partners, leverage your networks to really also validate while you're in this problem framing phase, and validate every assumption and challenge yourself to also say, do I know where my assumptions are, and make sure that you push beyond those. So I know that we are pretty much out of time, but I do just want to reference that in the other insights that we've shared, we go into more about inclusive design and how we really are inclusive in all of the approaches that we have, and how we really encourage you that as you're coming back to that user and the user need, that you're also thinking about who is involved at each stage. Who is that user and what do they need? But also, as you break that down into your solution, don't forget to think about who is participating, who's benefiting, who is in the room, who's not in the room, who is not being accounted for or addressed, or whose voice is not at the table. And consistently push yourself to go beyond, to think about who are you missing? How else could you be inclusive in your solution and in your design to make sure that that impact we seek is for everyone, and that we're not only focusing on one element of the population or certain segments of the community, but that we're really thinking about sustainable impact for everyone. And really just want to drive home that point that the Unleash methodology and the focus on the SDGs, one major component of that is leaving no one behind. And the SDGs really are about sustainable impact for everyone around the globe in achieving equality for all groups of individuals. So just make sure throughout this process that you're also thinking about that inclusive component, whether you're seeking to achieve peace and access to justice in all that you're doing, or if you're developing a new technology platform to address a critical need, no matter where you are on the spectrum of services or work that you're doing in your solution, don't forget to think about inclusion and how other people are affected. So I'm going to jump quickly towards the later parts of, sorry, I guess I jumped too quickly, but just really want to quickly reflect as we're coming to the end here, some final thoughts and tips. So we really always say to have courage and ensure that you're living in a sustainable way. These are hard issues that we're all working on here. None of the things that we're addressing are small challenges. Everything about the SDGs and what you all are working on, and even everything involved in the Reaching 16 campaign, are very complex. They might feel very daunting, but it's important to have that courage because we're pursuing these things because they're so important. The world needs us to, and your community needs you to. So be courageous, lean on each other, connect with the community, and make sure that you're also thinking about your role in sustainability and how you can think about it as a marathon. We're not going to achieve these changes overnight. That's why we give ourselves that space, even for achieving the goals together. Jen, do you want to take the next one? Jen, you're muted.
Now you're muted, Ariel.
Sorry about that, guys. Then you also want to get to know your team deeply and ensure that you're aligned on those ambitions. Again, we're not going to accomplish any of this alone. So whether you're talking about your immediate team, the organization in which you work, or the community where you're serving, or even the partners and the donors that you're working with, it's really important to build those personal connections and make sure that you're aligned in the objectives and that you're working together towards those goals. And sometimes it might be that people have differing goals, and that's okay too. We can all be aligned towards the impact we want to have, but sometimes, you know, the team that you start with in a solution may not be the team that you stay with, but it's just important to make sure that you're on that journey together and you're willing to have those open conversations. And also, as you're going through this process, once you get to that solution or the ideas that you really want to test quickly. Do it cheap, do it quick. Don't be afraid to use that pen and paper and to figure out how to actually allow yourself that space to fail fast and to learn, but make sure that you take that time to take the learning and drive it back into your process so that you're going to achieve a better solution and actually hopefully meet that user need. And then again, strive for inclusion and the diversity of perspective. I loved Lee's note about what his mentor had previously shared about really thinking about how do you bring more diverse people into the conversation. Yes, we're changing the conversation, but also who's missing at that table, or who else can you include? How can we look at everything from a new and a diverse perspective and be inclusive? And I also strongly encourage you to make sure it's not enough to just check the box. If we're not actually welcoming those voices and integrating those perspectives into what we're doing, then we haven't gone far enough. So let's make sure that we keep pushing in all that we do at a solution level, in our problem framing and the way that we're approaching our design, but then also as we implement. These are all ideas that you can take with you throughout that process. And I know that we've shared some of this in the chats as we go, but really want to encourage you all. This was just the tip of the iceberg. All of our programs obviously are much longer, and we also have some recordings that are already available. The next one that we're doing for the Insight series is focused on implementation, but I've shared the links earlier, and I know Cole has been reposting. Please feel free to go back and watch the individual Insight series. The innovation process, you can skip over all the parts that you had already covered today, but if you'd like to dig in a little bit more, that one does cover some of the things we didn't get to for the rest of problem framing and ideation. And then, as Cole said, we'll also be sharing out these links so that you can watch the full presentation. You just won't have us guiding you through it, but the other one will. And then you can launch into the solution and prototyping, where we also share more tools and online resources that you can use even in a virtual environment. In the theory of change, we talk about not only the theory of change, but also some concepts of monitoring and evaluation, and how you can also integrate that from the beginning to ensure that we are reaching that long-term impact that we seek. And then we hope you can actually get caught up and then join us in February for implementation. And we ask that you do follow Unleash on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, whatever social media you use, so that you are able to see the postings and when those openings come up for the next round of hacks and for the 2021 program. And then I believe Lee shared it earlier, but make sure if you haven't yet, check out the amazing work that Spur is doing and support that 123 plus mission. I saw some great information going back and forth in the chat, and we're so appreciative of all of the insights that everyone shared today, and for you all making the space to be with us this morning. And then Cole, with that, I'll hand it back to you for any other final reminders and housekeeping that you'd like to share with everyone. Thank you guys so much for being here with us. We're very delighted to be with you.
Awesome. Thanks, Ariel. Thanks, Karina, Jennifer, and Lee. Great being here with you today, and great being able to host this on the YouthLead platform. But once again, I just want to extend a great thanks for everyone this morning, and thanks for, or this evening, where you may be, or the middle of the night. Thanks for being here. We really appreciate it. We hope you got some valuable lessons out of this, and we look forward to engaging with you guys soon. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for being here, everyone.